Hello, are you wondering how to get to a perfect 800 in the digital SAT English section? You've come to the right place. My name is Ashay, and I am the lead instructor for English at EZScholar. And today I'm going to show you how you can get to that perfect 800. Although elusive, it is possible to get there. And let me start by sharing a success story. One of our students recently received the perfect 800 on his digital SAT English. And this was just his second attempt. In the process, he improved by a whopping 140 points. How did he get there? Let us start with the basics. It's important to understand the test before you get to a great score. In terms of the test format, the SAT is fairly straightforward. It is made up of two sections, English and Math. In English, there are two modules which have 27 multiple choice questions each, and you need to solve them within 32 minutes. For math, again, you have two modules with 22 questions and 35 minutes for each of these modules. The most important thing here is that the second modules for English and math are adaptive, which means they will adapt to your performance of module one. If you do really well on module one English and module one math, you'll get more challenging module two for both of these questions. To get to that perfect 800, for English, you need to get a perfect 27 on module one so that you get to a very challenging module two and then ace that module as well. All right. So let's move on and talk about what are the question types and content domains involved here. The English has four different content domains. The first is craft and structure, which has about 13 to 15 questions with a rough weightage of 28%. The question types include words in context, which test you on vocabulary, text structure and purpose, which test you on the logical progression of a text, and then cross-text connections, where you need to look at two different texts in the same question and figure out what is the relation between them. The next domain is information and ideas, which has 12 to 14 questions with a rough weightage of 26%. And the question types are central ideas and details, where, like the name suggests, you need to look at what are the main ideas behind the text or some key details. Then command of evidence, textual as well as quantitative, where you need to support or weaken the claim presented in the text with the help of information presented in the text or in the graphics or both. And then you have inferences, where you need to look at the text very carefully and get to the right conclusion based on the information presented there. The third domain is the standard English conventions, which has 11 to 15 questions and a rough weightage of 26%. The question types are boundaries, where your understanding of the punctuation marks is tested, and then form, structure, and sense, where your knowledge of grammar rules is assessed. Finally, you have expression of ideas, which has 8 to 12 questions with a rough weightage of 20%. And here the questions are transitions and rhetorical synthesis. Transitions, obviously, will again look at connecting sentences with the most appropriate words and phrases between them. For rhetorical synthesis, you look at some student notes and then help the student accomplish a goal that they've set out. So these are all the content domains and question types on the English section. Now, let's look at the basics. Like I mentioned, the standard English conventions, it's roughly 26% of your score. If you know your punctuation and grammar rules really well, these 26% marks are there for the taking. So what do you need to know? In punctuation, you need to know how and where to use the comma, the dashes, the semicolons, and the colons. And for the grammar, again, there are just four rules that you need to know really well. They are subject-verb agreement, pronoun agreement, parallel structure, and modifier placement. After this, it's important to inculcate a very strong reading habit. Reading on the SAT is a very important skill, and the more you read in your day-to-day life, the better you'll do on your SAT English. Now, a number of students, they focus specifically on scientific journals for their SAT English prep. And it's not a bad idea, but it's not sufficient. The SAT English, although relies heavily on scientific texts, also has a number of texts which are based on literature, and a number of opinions are also given there. So it's a good idea to read editorials from leading English newspapers and try to read some poems or literature. And these are easily available online for free, especially if you're looking at older texts. So, like I said, the more you read, the better you get on the SAT English. Ideally, you should give about 30 to 45 minutes for reading every day if you're looking at achieving that magical 800. All right. Moving on, there are questions on vocabulary on the digital SAT, and there is a simple process to master vocabulary. Ideally, when you come across a word that you don't really know well, or you've heard about it, but you don't really know it confidently enough to use it in a sentence, you should capture the word. Now, by capture, I don't mean that you should just search it on Google and be done with it. Ideally, you should note it down. You could do it on a Google document, you could do it on a conventional notebook. Once you do it, look at how it is used. Maybe note down that sentence as well. And then, after you read the meaning and learn it, try and use it in your own sentence. Form a sentence using that word. This will help you retain the word for longer. And with this process, you'll be able to perfect a number of words that you otherwise would struggle with on the SAT. So you don't need thousands of flashcards here. You just need to know words that you otherwise struggle with, or words that you read frequently but don't really know that well. And that's how you can master vocabulary for the SAT. Now, let's look at some exam strategies. The time is of essence on the SAT, especially for the second module. A number of students do really well on module 1, and sometimes they save as many as 10 minutes at the end of module 1. And that gives them a bit of a false sense of security for module 2, but they don't realize that module 2 is going to be challenging and it'll have more tough questions. And that's why, especially for module 2, it is important to pace yourself well. So you can start with areas that are your strengths. Maybe start with grammar or punctuation questions if you're really well versed with those concepts and do really well on them. Maybe start with those questions and then go back to the ones which are generally difficult. It is also a good idea to mark certain questions for review and revisit them at the end. You should never spend a long amount of time on a single question and get stuck on it. This way, you're losing out on maybe 3 or 4 questions which are easier towards the end of your text. So it's really important to manage your time well and to understand your strengths. It is also important to eliminate effectively. All the SAT English questions have one and only one clear answer. It means all the other choices, all 3 choices, they have some mistake somewhere or they're not right. So even if you have a slight reason to believe that this choice may not work, it is safe to eliminate. But then you have to know good strategies, and they're connected with question types on the SAT. For individual questions, there are different strategies. And mastering those strategies, again, will help you eliminate effectively on the SAT. Last but not the least, you should not second guess yourself. I have seen so many students who change their answers only to realize that they've gone from a right answer to a wrong one. If you don't have a valid reason to change your answer, ideally you shouldn't do so on the test. Like SAT, you should trust your instincts a little more, right? Moving on. And again, a very important tool is to use the practice tests and mock tests that you may have at your dispersal. Start by looking at sectional tests. These are tests on individual question types, and you should attempt as many tests that you have on these. This will help you understand your errors. You should note these errors down and see if there is a trend or a pattern there. See if you can approach the questions differently. Maybe you can do something differently, maybe use a different strategy, maybe approach the question a little differently, but it's very important to be proactive here. Once this is done, you should look at multiple mock tests, not just 1 or 2. If you feel that, oh, I'm getting into 700s easily here and I'll stop, that's just not it. You should take a number of mock tests, because it's important, again, to pace yourselves well, to understand what are your strengths and weaknesses, and that will help you develop your approach. Like we looked at how you should approach module 2. Maybe go from this question to that question, maybe go in reverse, maybe go till that question, then break, and then go to a certain area. This can be developed only with multiple mock tests, and only if you know what errors are you making in these sectional tests. So this is a crucial part of your prep in getting to that perfect 800. Finally, it would be a bonus if you can work with an expert for your SAT English, because a number of tests will give you analytics and you'll be able to understand what your weaknesses are, but you may not really know how to resolve those weaknesses. When you work with an expert, you can actually discuss alternate strategies with them. You can see if there are things that you didn't really know about. You may get an insight into a question type or a text, which can change a number of things for you and can maybe just help you get over a roadblock. In terms of goals, when you work with an expert, you have clear goals to look at, and generally these are defined within time frames. So when you're working with an expert, you can see your progress, you can track your progress yourself. You can see, okay, 1 week back I was really bad at this particular thing. Now that I've done a few exercises over this week, towards the end of the week I am doing a little better. Maybe after a month I'm doing much better. I was making some silly mistakes here, but now after a month of practice with a number of strategies, I'm doing much better in this topic, and that becomes a very important tool as well. Finally, we have a complementary diagnostic test for you, so feel free to get in touch with us, and we can offer you that diagnostic test. And once you take the test, you'll get to know where you stand in math and English, and then you can plan your prep from there. Do make sure to subscribe to all our social media handles so that you get access to more such videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.